Welcome to Healthy Buzz, the podcast for women who are craving honest answers in a supported community. Hosted by Brandy Homerding, a certified nutrition therapy practitioner who believes your body isn't broken, but the narrative around women's health is. Each week, we're diving deep into holistic health topics, challenging the one-size-fits-all approach, and empowering you to trust your own informed intuition. Get ready to feel seen, supported, and seriously informed. This is Healthy Buzz, where collaboration meets unfiltered transparency in women's health. Welcome back to another episode of Healthy Buzz. Today, I am joined by Edie Horstman of Wellness with Edie to discuss a hidden epidemic in women's health. We're diving in deep into how chronic underfueling and relentless pressure of diet culture are silently wrecking women's hormones, energy, and metabolism. Edie is a double certified integrative nutrition health coach and nutrition consultant who helps women build their energy, balance their hormones, and finally feel nourished in every season of their life. Through her platform, Wellness with Edie, she blends evidence-based nutrition with a realistic, sustainable approach because she believes wellness should enhance your life, not control it. After healing her own PCOS, transforming her metabolism, and navigating 2 pregnancies, Edie now supports women through fertility, postpartum, hormone health, and a body recomposition with simple, empowering strategies that actually work. Edie, welcome to today's show.
Thank you, Brandy. I am so excited to chat and so honored to be here. I was just thinking about when we started working together, which probably was at least 7 years ago, maybe?
Oh gosh.
7 or 8 years ago?
Not that long, because Be Collect Wellness has only been here for 6 years.
But it must have been like early on, because I think we started working together before I got pregnant with Wilson, my first. Anyway, I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, so excited to have you. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your personal journey. Like, I know a lot, but our listeners don't know a lot. So let's talk a little bit about like PCOS, your diagnosis, and what you had to do to overcome your PCOS and really learn how to fuel your body.
Yes. So let's take it back to when I was 15. And at that point, I still didn't have a menstrual cycle. And my mom took me to our family practitioner, and I ended up being put on essentially a progesterone supplement to induce my cycle. I was not diagnosed with PCOS when I was 15. I wasn't diagnosed until I was actually 27. But it is very likely that when I went in for that appointment at 15, had they either looked at my follicles, had they looked at my AMH, had we just discussed what a regular cycle looks like, the doctor probably would have indicated that I had PCOS at that point. So if we fast forward all the way to when I was 27, sort of in between that time period of when I was 15, took that progesterone supplement, which did induce a cycle, but I had an irregular cycle from my mid-teens all the way up until almost when I was 30 years old. And part of the issue, if you will, here too, is that I was also put on birth control. So it was masking any underlying symptoms. So I had an irregular cycle initially, was then put on birth control. And so that was like a Band-Aid to what was happening beneath the surface. By the time I got to the end of my 20s, my husband and I really wanted to start trying. And so I went to my OBGYN. I hadn't had a menstrual cycle in about 2 years, and she did a bunch of testing, and we did an ultrasound, and she diagnosed me with PCOS. And part of me was relieved to have an answer to why I had an irregular cycle. The other part of me was extremely overwhelmed because she also told me, well, we're going to need to put you on metformin, and it's going to be very unlikely that you're going to be able to conceive naturally. Spoiler alert, I did go on to conceive naturally. But she told me all of these things during our session that was really, I hate to say that it was fear-mongering, but I did not walk out of her office feeling empowered. I felt confused and overwhelmed. Now, simultaneously and sort of serendipitously, if you will, right around this time period, I also decided to leave my tech job and study holistic nutrition. Part of this, though, was because I had gone through a time period in my 20s when I was over-exercising and under-eating, and I really did not have a healthy relationship with my body. So kind of looking back on this entire time period of my life, I think it really was serendipitous or coincidental, whatever you want to believe, that I was diagnosed with PCOS, decided to go back to school to study nutrition, And the knowledge that I obtained becoming a health coach really was the catalyst for me to take my health into my own hand and put my PCOS into remission naturally. And I knew just right off the bat that I didn't want to take a medication to just further mask my symptoms. I wanted to get to the root cause. And in so many ways, this has fueled my current perspective on this whole language that we see on social media about hormone balance. Which, when you think about hormone balance, like what does that actually mean? I think there's a lot of misinformation on social media about what hormone balance actually means, like women chasing hormone balance. Like, what does this actually mean? When what we actually want to be doing is building healthy cells. So this is what I started doing in my late 20s and early 30s in order to get pregnant. I started building healthy cells so that I could build healthy tissues and healthy organs, and the entire endocrine system within my body could be regulated. So that is essentially, in terms of like my initial diagnosis to all the way up to my 30s. I'm now in my mid 30s, but I took my health into my own hands. I became my own advocate, and that's how I was able to put my PCOS into remission. And we can dive into specifically what I did to do that, but it really was a matter of me just being my own advocate and knowing that I didn't have to take a medication, that I could resolve it on my own.
Yeah, that is so empowering to hear your story and the like transformation that you had with getting this diagnosis, overcoming so many things that people said that like, you're going to have to be on this medication, you're not going to be able to conceive naturally, you have to do all of these things, and maybe have this outcome where you're like, hold on, let's reevaluate a couple different things. I do agree that like having your health coach certification at the same time, like really probably opened your eyes to a lot of different things, and you were really able to advocate for yourself and become empowered with your own health and wellness journey. So for our listeners, could you help explain like what PCOS is and how that impacts like the menstrual cycle, hormones, and your fertility ultimately?
So, a woman who is diagnosed with PCOS, and I also want to just start off by saying that a lot of women have PCOS that don't actually realize that they have it. I think the stat is roughly 80% of women who have or exhibit the symptoms of PCOS don't even know that they have it. But likely, some of the symptoms for your listeners that are thinking, well, maybe this is what's causing my irregular cycle, is if she has a really long cycle, she's not ovulating every single cycle, her body is possibly creating more testosterone than she needs, and that can exhibit physically on the body with like some receding hairlines. It might be some extra facial hair. For me, I never had those symptoms, but I did have other symptoms, which I'll dive into. But with PCOS, you have a lot of extra follicles, or like a string of pearls, I think is what they call it, on your ovaries. And so you can see, or a doctor can see, that you have PCOS based off of your ultrasound. There's also blood work that will indicate PCOS as well, which is when a woman has a high AMH. Her ratio of LH to FSH is not within normal range, but there's about 3 indicators that will tell a woman that she has polycystic ovary syndrome. But for the listener who's like, I haven't gone to get an ultrasound yet, I haven't done the blood work, just think about if you're currently tracking your cycle, is your cycle like 40, maybe to even like 60 days in length? Do you exhibit some of those physical symptoms that I mentioned? Those can be indicators that you do have PCOS. Again, for me, I didn't have those. However, I was not ovulating every single cycle. My blood sugar was completely dysregulated, and I figured that out by wearing a glucose monitor. So wearing a glucose monitor was pivotal for me being able to put my PCOS into remission. My blood sugar was constantly out of range, which we can dive into that. But once I was able to essentially regulate my blood sugar, I started resting a lot more than I was. I have a history of over-exercising and under-eating, and that was certainly contributing to elevated testosterone in my body. I didn't have adequate body fat. There were a lot of factors, truthfully, that went into me not having a cycle for many years. I do think in part, in addition to the PCOS, I also possibly had hypothalamic amenorrhea, meaning that I wasn't ovulating because I didn't have a high enough body fat percentage. So essentially, once I brought my body back into homeostasis, which took about 6 months, of being really consistent with certain habits. And, when it comes to diet and lifestyle, it took about 6 months for me to regain my cycle. And then about a year later, we conceived with my first.
Amazing. Amazing. There's so many great things that I want to unpack here a little bit. One of the things is, there are 3 main criteria that a practitioner will use when it comes to getting that official diagnosis. I didn't get a diagnosis of PCOS till I was 38. And also looking back at my history, I was masking my symptom because I was on hormonal birth control of some sort for 17 years, which was masking a ton of my symptoms, but still deep down, I was having all these symptoms kind of pushing through, even with hormonal birth control. That I was something doesn't seem right. Okay, so of the criteria, one is to have, like Edie mentioned, the anovulatory cycles or the really prolonged cycles. So if you're having less than 8 menstrual cycles a year, that's kind of one indication around that. You can also have the high androgens, the high testosterone. So that, again, we would notice on blood work, but there are the physical symptoms that Edie mentioned. So it could be facial hair growth, receding, falling, thinning out hair, receding hairline or thinning hair. You could have really oily skin. You could have kind of some weight gain can be linked to that. And then that is going to be tied to some higher blood sugar dysregulation, higher insulin levels too. Insulin is not necessarily one of the factors that they use for diagnosis, but we see that very commonly with people with PCOS is that there's a blood sugar imbalance happening as well. And then the third thing is the cysts on the ovaries. And so that would require an ultrasound. Now, you can have PCOS and not have cysts on your ovaries because you only need to meet 2 of the 3 criteria. I personally have not had an ultrasound, but I met the other 2 criteria to get me that diagnosis. And then like Edie said, the LH and the FSH, my LH ratio to FSH ratio was really off. That was a huge indicator as well. So there is some things on blood work that can be further explored to validate that PCOS diagnosis. But again, there's so many underlying factors. Is it hypothalamic amenorrhea? And that could definitely be something that is going on. So let's talk a little bit more about that, the under eating, the under fueling, and how that is impacting women's hormones. And I mean, we're getting that message all the time from diet culture. Eat less, take up less space, and move your body more. So how can we overcome that or walk through that narrative that is given to us?
Yes. And I fell victim to this in my late teens and early 20s. I found healthy living blogs, which I will put that in air quotes, because this would have been circa 2009, 2010. And a lot of these healthy living blogs were talking about cutting carbohydrates. It was sort of an offshoot of the Atkins diet at the time, and really lowering fat from sources, whether they were from plant sources or animal sources. And at the time, protein wasn't talked about in the same way that it's talked about today. But it was really this low carb, low fat. To be honest, I don't even know what these women were eating when I think back to these healthy living blogs. But I started a journey of essentially clean eating, what really became orthorexia, which is when, and I was never formally diagnosed with this, but looking back, it is 100% what I was doing. I was very meticulous about what I was putting in my body. I didn't count calories, but I ate extremely clean. This was also the time period where gluten and going gluten-free really took the spotlight. So I removed gluten from my diet, thinking that that was necessary. I removed dairy. I wasn't eating any sugar. To be honest, I remember at the time I would make a big salad to have for dinner at night, and I wasn't putting any salad dressing on it. I'm like, what the heck was I thinking? We need those healthy fats in order to have cholesterol in our body, which helps us build progesterone. Without that cholesterol, there's no way that you can have a normal menstrual cycle, because building progesterone relies on that cholesterol. So I ate just very clean and certainly was under fueling my body for how much I was exercising. So like I said, very much fell victim to this mentality. It really wasn't until I met my husband, to be totally honest with you, who to this day has a completely normal relationship with food. When we first started dating, I would have my big salad at night without any salad dressing on it. And he would order pizza from a local spot down the street. And so we were on 2 opposite ends of the spectrum. But the more time we spent together, the more that we were able to find a middle ground. He adopted some of my habits, if you will, and I adopted some of his, coupled with the fact that I then began my health coaching certification and really started to look at food as fuel and as nourishment. And I would say, to kind of fast forward to where I'm at today, is I really try to bridge the gap between intuitive eating and intentional eating. So by intuitive, I mean I'm honoring my cravings, what sounds good to me today. And then the intentional piece of it is, am I getting enough carbohydrates? Am I getting enough protein? Am I getting enough fats to not only support my strength training that I'm doing, but also to help me just keep up as a mom, as a businesswoman, as someone who wants to have a normal menstrual cycle. So I have really flipped the script of trying to shrink my body to actually building on my frame, which I'm pretty petite. Like with shoes on, I'm barely 5 feet tall. But this past year, I really ventured on a journey of putting muscle on my body. And I've been able to track that, and I've gained over 8 pounds of muscle since December. So it's been about a year. And it has been, Brandy, I will go as far as to say is it has been the most empowering thing that I have done for my body and my mind to have a goal. I never had a specific number in mind. I was like, I just want to feel stronger and more empowered in my body. This whole journey really started from needing to rebuild my core after having my second child, but it morphed into putting on muscle because I started to feel so empowered and confident in my body. I noticed my posture started to change, and then my hormones did as well. So to circle back to your question, this past year has shown me that fueling properly not only is going to change your physique, but it will also regulate your hormones because your cells are receiving all of the nutrients that they actually need to perform properly and do what they need to do and give energy to different organs and systems in your body. So I know I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but understanding why we need carbohydrates, why we need protein, why we need fats is truly so empowering for the woman who's listening right now and is either restricting herself to a certain number of calories per day and is either noticing that her weight is either completely either plateauing or possibly she's gaining weight, but she's so confused because she's restricting her calories. Once you are actually providing your body with the fuel that it needs, your metabolism will thank you. And I will I will go as far as to say that it will completely change your life, every aspect of your life when you start fueling your body properly.
Yes, you are in good company here. I love that. Hey, Healthy Buzz community. Have you been curious about using a continuous glucose monitor to unlock powerful insights to your metabolic health? Imagine seeing in real time how your body responds to different meals, different workouts, and also the effects of stress. Now, what if you could experience those benefits without being locked into any type of recurring subscription like some of the other continuous glucose monitor programs out there? With my Blood Sugar Savvy course, you'll get exactly that. You'll receive access to 7 engaging learning modules, 2 continuous glucose monitors to start your wellness journey, plus 4 weekly one-on-one video strategy sessions with me where I'll personally guide you to understanding your CGM data. We'll work together to identify your unique blood sugar patterns and create customized strategies for better energy, mood, and overall well-being. Oh, and by the way, this is especially crucial during your peri- and postmenopausal years. Blood Sugar Savvy is about understanding your body on a deeper level, implementing practical strategies, and gaining sustainable knowledge to support your overall health and wellness. Ready to get Blood Sugar Savvy and take control of your metabolic health? Healthy Buzz listeners can save $30 simply by using the code BUZZ at checkout when you enroll at bcw.bcollectivewellness.com/Blood Sugar Savvy. That's bcw.bcollectivewellness.com/Blood Sugar Savvy. Don't forget to use that code BUZZ at checkout for your $30 savings. Your personalized blood sugar journey starts now. I think this is such a trap, this slippery slope of women feel desperate sometimes when it comes to their weight. And they're like, the only thing that I really know is to cut calories, take up less space, move my body more. They feel like they have control over that when they feel like maybe their body feels out of control to them, right? Maybe they're not having a regular menstrual cycle. Maybe they're gaining weight. Maybe they're not sleeping well. Maybe their energy is declining. And so they're like, well, I can't control right now how my body is feeling, but I can control how many calories I'm putting in my body, what type of calories I'm putting in my body, and how often I'm moving my body. So it's really shifting. And I love that you pointed out like this clean eating epidemic of like such a label that became so damaging. I actually had a eating disorder psychologist on for an episode, and we talked a lot about like how some of these like different clean eating or these different diets and things like that can lead to such a disruptive and destructive relationship with food, and how that's can develop and morph into different types of eating disorders. So that is so powerful that you pointed that out, that like you recognize now looking back that this was a big issue for me. But let's talk a little bit more about one of the macronutrients that you mentioned, carbohydrates, because carbs specifically, we do know can have the biggest impact on blood sugar. And as somebody with PCOS, sometimes we do need to understand how our body is specifically responding to different carbohydrates. But how is increasing your carbohydrate intake promoting like hormone, quote unquote, balance or better hormones?
Yes. So about 6 months ago, when I weaned my second, I didn't get my cycle back for about 9 weeks, which all things considered is actually not a very long time. For some women, it can take upwards of a year for their cycle to return once they wean. However, during that 9 week time period, I really doubled down on increasing my carbohydrate intake because in order to ovulate, we need to be eating enough carbohydrates. And if you're not eating enough carbohydrates, you likely are not ovulating if you are someone who has an irregular cycle. That said, it can be a little bit of a slippery slope, right? Because if we eat too many carbohydrates, are we then going to wreck our blood sugar? And this is where I feel like on social media, wellness becomes this game of telephone, right? Because we'll see language around don't eat a banana because that's going to spike your blood sugar. And it becomes extremely black and white when nutrition is really in this gray area. Like there's so much nuance, but unfortunately that nuance really gets stripped and the context gets stripped away on social media. But what I started doing, to circle back to the carbohydrates, is I started increasing my carbohydrates, but I just paired them with carbs and fats. So with dinner, for example, I would add an extra, half a cup of rice or something. And what I would also do is eat my carbohydrates, some of them anyway, towards the end of my meal. So I would start my meal with my protein, with my fats, with my vegetables, and then I would have more of those carbohydrates towards the end of the meal because that will automatically decrease your glucose response. So for women who have PCOS that are listening, that are interested in possibly increasing their carbohydrate, whether that's because they want more energy, maybe they want to see if it will help them ovulate more frequently. My trick there is to just consume most of your carbohydrates towards the end of your meal. Another thing you can do is go for like a short walk after you eat, and that will help your muscles just soak up that extra glucose. But we need carbohydrates in order to ovulate. And it wasn't until I hit about 9 weeks of being really consistent with extra carbohydrates that I noticed my first menstrual cycle. So I don't think it's coincidence that that happened. I think that that was me being really consistent with this. And to this day, I've now had, it's now the middle of November, and I have had 3 completely regular, almost completely painless cycles, which is something that if I had told this to my 27-year-old self, I just never would have thought that that was possible. And so much of this comes down to just fueling my body properly and eating enough. And I notice in a lot of my one-on-one coaching, most women are they're under fueling because they're scared of eating more carbohydrates, because they're unintentionally under eating their protein. So for me, I aim for about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Okay, I also want to mention with carbohydrates, like there's a really big difference between consuming a bunch of pastries and having sweet potatoes and wild rice and quinoa and fruit, because those contain fiber. So if we are consuming carbohydrates that come from whole foods, your body is going to be able to metabolize that glucose in a really different way, in a way that your blood sugar is going to be relatively stable versus, a spike and then a crash from having a muffin on its own. And it's not that you can never have the muffin, you absolutely should have it. Like, that is where the intentional and intuitive eating component comes together. Have the muffin, but have it alongside some eggs or some Greek yogurt or a protein smoothie to just help your glucose response. But as a whole, most of us need to be eating more carbohydrates. And if you are someone who is curious about what your response will be from increasing your carb intake, you can either wear a glucose monitor or get some blood work done and see what your A1C is, which is going to show you your glucose over the past 3 months. And that will let you know if you're within the right range.
Yes, I love that. I found it to be so transformative for myself to use a CGM and understand, even like in this past year, I'm shifting more into perimenopause. And so we know that in perimenopause, estrogen is starting to decline. And so our cells become less sensitive to the effects of insulin. And so I was having a little bit higher of a blood sugar. And I'm like, what is going on here? So I used the CGM again for about 4 months to kind of really understand what was happening with my body. And it's so empowering and informative. So the goal is, when you use a CGM, is to learn, not to discipline yourself and like get angry at yourself and be like, I'm messing it all up. Instead, you're learning how your body actually responds, because the way I respond to rice is going to be very different than the way that Edie responds to rice. We are biologically different people. And so our bodies respond in very different ways. And so once you learn, then you can start implementing strategies like she talked about, the meal sequencing, going for a walk afterwards. There's a lot of different things that you can do to support your blood sugar and not necessarily have to be like, I can never eat this food again. Then we're having that intentional part of it.
And, along those lines, Brandy, that got me thinking about how so much bio-individuality is removed from the conversation on social media. And this is something for the listener. If she takes away one thing, it's to remember that your DNA, your epigenetics, your lifestyle, your preferences, all of that, the way that you respond to rice, like you just said, is going to be different than anyone else that you see on social media. It's going to be different than your partner, your husband, your best friend. And so much of that conversation is lost on social media. And I really want women to remember that as an individual, your response to diet, to lifestyle, it's really important to remember that what we see on social media isn't just this like universal way that we should be fueling our bodies. It's different for everyone, depending on also what season of life you're in and what your goals are. But a lot of that is just forgotten when we look at, different trends that go viral on social media.
Yeah. And I would say, to go back what Edie said about like the A1C, your fasting glucose, they're not always be part of like your normal physical lab work that your doctor will order each year. Although I see that this gets missed a lot. And that's really unfortunate, because it does provide a lot of insight. And then you should be going back and looking at your blood work yourself as well. Historically, what do you see? Are there shifts happening where your glucose is slowly climbing up and up and up? Traditionally, somebody's not going to mention anything about your glucose being too high until it's too high. And if it's over a fasting glucose over 100, definitely a red flag. Over 90, those of us in the holistic space are kind of like, ooh, we might need to be paying attention here to what's happening with your blood sugar if it's fasting over 90. But then that's only giving us a one point in time, right? Your blood sugar that morning when you went to have your lab draw, that was what the point in time was.
Yep.
The CGM is going to provide you that daily feedback where you can see exactly what's kind of happening based on stress, based on what you're eating. If you're sick, if you're dehydrated, if you slept like shit, those are all going to impact your blood sugar. But then a piece that I feel like is often missing is that fasting insulin. That oftentimes can give us the warning signal before you will see your blood sugar or your A1C become elevated. And it's very rare that gets drawn at a traditional appointment, yearly physical.
Yes. Knowledge is power. And for me, I get blood work done at least once a year, if not twice a year. And it's so helpful, because then when I get targeted these ads on Instagram for like, take this supplement, to improve your metabolism or your hormones or whatever it is, I can very quickly swipe away, because I know I don't need that. But for the average consumer who isn't getting blood work done, it's so easy to get targeted by these ads and think that all of a sudden you need to be taking a slew of supplements in order to be healthy. But in all reality, you may only need just a handful of supplements based off of what your blood work is showing. So absolutely 100% agree. Blood work is so crucial to know where your nutrient deficiencies are and what you need versus what you're being, marketed on the internet.
And I will say too, if you are having a difficult time with your provider to order the labs that you need, one, you can find a new provider, somebody that can order those labs for you. Somebody like myself, I can order labs and help you get the full picture. Now you do have to pay out of pocket, right? Or there are direct to consumer labs. But I will say that if you aren't working with somebody who can interpret your labs, you're kind of at the will of your own interpretation and, or I guess, let's be honest, using AI. And I will tell you that I have caught a lot of errors in AI when it comes to not necessarily lab interpretation, because I don't use it for that, but rather like when I'm looking at different research articles or I'm asking it something, or even, to be honest, with my statistics homework last year, I was like, I don't know. Statistics is real hard for me. And it would tell me an answer. I'm like, that's not the correct answer. My answer key says that's not the right answer. How did you get that answer? And it'll be like, oh yeah, you're right. Anyway, I digress. So we have to think about, like, if you're ordering those labs yourself, do you know then what to do with that information? Or do you need to work with somebody who can help you understand what to do with that information?
Totally.
So how would you say, we have talked a lot about like the noise around social media, and how do you recommend that they stay grounded when it comes to the information that they're consuming on social media and what actually applies to them versus what is kind of fad or trend that's out there?
Yeah, so my first suggestion there is figure out who the source is, right? Like, is this just an influencer with an affiliate link? Is this a doctor? Who is the person that you're receiving this information from? And if you want to then take that a step further, I would either like fact check that information. PubMed is a great source there. And then ultimately, you need to figure out if that information, the habit, the supplement, whatever it is, the nutritional advice, does that apply to you specifically? And are you being either fear-mongered into implementing that habit or supplement, or change in your diet, or do you feel empowered? Because that's a huge red flag. If there is fear, it's probably not something that you should be implementing, because you're already going to feel anxious and overwhelmed implementing it. So you should feel really empowered. And for the woman who is constantly receiving a lot of noise from the wellness space on her social media, actually the first thing that I would do before you even figure out who the source is clean out your social media. While you're listening right now, or as soon as you're done listening to this episode, go ahead and just stop following 10 Instagram accounts or 50 Instagram accounts, so that the information that you are receiving is not overwhelming for you, because we are in like this golden era, if you will, of just information overload. And it is really hard to parse out like what you actually need versus what you don't. If you're excited about it, if you're feeling empowered by it, those are green flags. If you've gotten your blood work done and you know what your deficiencies are, and then you hear about a vitamin D supplement and your vitamin D happens to be low, great. Those are all signs that whatever you are absorbing will help you. But yeah, I think a lot of this really comes back to just figuring out your body's feedback and like what signs, is your body giving you as you are listening to a certain podcast or watching a reel on Instagram. Your body will give you that feedback. And if you actually start to listen to your gut, listen to your intuition, which is hard for a lot of people, a lot of the women that I work with are just constantly living in autopilot. Like, we're not even taking a moment during our day to pause. And so I will actually have my clients put into their Google Calendar at least twice a day. It's a 2-minute body check. And this is something that you can even do right now while you're listening, is scan your body from head to toe. And how are you feeling mentally, physically? Are you feeling tired? Are you feeling happy? How did you sleep last night? Like, we're not checking in whatsoever. And that really then clouds our ability to look at all this information that we're receiving on the internet and if it actually applies to us, because we're not even checking in with ourselves in the first place.
Yeah, that is so So powerful and so insightful to think about, like, what are we consuming when it comes to social media? I mean, not eating, but like literally, like, what type of
Right.
information are we consuming? And is that supporting you on your wellness journey, or is it causing a lot more anxiety, apprehension, questioning yourself? Because that can happen, right? We start to no longer trust our intuition. So many women I work with do not have any trust with what their body is telling them. And so we need to rebuild that trust within our bodies again. I would love to talk more about your journey to putting on more muscle and gaining 8 pounds of muscle, because so many women are very scared of, like, if I lift weights, I'm going to, well, they think they're going to get really bulky and big and they don't want to have that aesthetic, or they're really scared that the scale is going to go up. So knowing a little bit about kind of the over exercising and under eating, what shifts did you have to make to, hey, the scale might change in a different way than I'm used to, and here's what I'm doing intentionally when it comes to like my movement and my fueling?
Yes, absolutely. So my exercise past was a lot of cardio. So I was doing a lot of running. I was also in my 20s. I was absolutely obsessed with a yoga sculpt class that I would go to pretty much 7 days a week, where I was sweating a ton. There wasn't a whole lot of yoga. It was weights, but they weren't heavy weights. So like 5 to maybe 8 pounds. Actually, it was probably like 3 to 5 pound weight. So not, yes, putting strain on your muscle, but not in the same sort of stimulus load as lifting something like a 15 or 20 pound or 25-pound dumbbell. But that's what I knew at the time. So I don't fault myself, but I became obsessed with it. So my past exercise self was really a lot of cardio and a lot of sweating. And I had it ingrained in me that if I wasn't sweating profusely, it wasn't an adequate workout. And again, a lot of this stemmed from those healthy living blogs that I found circa 2010, because that's just like what was in vogue. Like that's what was popular. It makes me so happy to see that there has been a shift and more women are reaching for heavier weights. I think there's still a lot of, at least what I see on my social media, is like a lot of women love their Pilates, which is great. I think there's absolutely a place for Pilates, lower impact, yoga, mobility to be like built into your exercise routine. But if you are specifically trying to change your physique and become stronger, you need to be picking up heavier weights. And that is going to happen through progressive overload. So incrementally over time, picking up heavier weights. And my physique, it's so interesting, Brandy. I actually weigh more now than I did after I had Wilson, my first baby. But my physique is completely different. And that's because muscle is more dense. Like it literally lifts your body. Your body will look completely different if you have 100 pounds of muscle on your body versus 100 pounds of fat on your body. Your body is going to look different. For me, one of the ways that I've been able to track and know this is because I use a smart scale at home that I step on about once a week just to track my progress. I don't feel like a ball and chain to it by any means. It certainly doesn't control me. For me, it's actually just really empowering to be able to see that muscle growth increase from this smart scale. And the reason why I even decided to get this scale in the first place was because I went through a time period where I was like, I think I'm getting stronger. I'm starting to lift heavier weights, and started tracking on this scale. And then all of a sudden I was like, holy crap, I've gained 5 pounds of muscle. Where can I go from here? And that was when I really dialed in my nutrition. So up until this point, I wasn't tracking my macros. I wasn't tracking my calories. A lot of this just happened from my own, I suppose, intuition, just really honoring my hunger. I mean, I was like, I'm sure, because I know you strength train as well, like you're ravenous after you eat. You may not even sweat that much during your session, but when you're lifting heavy weights, you get really hungry. So I was sort of automatically or naturally eating more. But once I saw that I had already hit about 5 pounds of muscle gain, I was like, how much further can I go? Now I'm really going to dial in my nutrition. I increased my protein. I increased my carbs. I didn't really have to change my fats too much. I've been very intuitive with my fats. And then boom, here we are almost a year later, and I'm continuing to put on muscle, and it's changed my life. I feel like in so many ways I'm just getting started, and like I want that same feeling, especially for the woman who was me 10 years ago when I was so scared to take up space and to grow my body. All I wanted to shrink and to quote tone my body. I feel better mentally and physically than I have in my entire life. And I weigh the most that I ever have. And yeah, it's changed my life.
Yes. So what I'm hearing is that it's not really the like quote unquote number on the scale, like how many pounds you weigh, but you're feeling a lot more energized. You're feeling a lot stronger. You're feeling a lot more confident when you allowed your body to take up space, to become, dare I say, a little bit larger because you have more muscle mass. And it's so scary for women to like have this change and see that scale go up, and they tie so much of their self-worth to how much they weigh or the size of their jeans or whatever that may be.
And I don't fault them. And I often hear this with my health coaching clients. Like, I don't fault women. I was in that same place of being really scared to see that number blinking back at me increase. Like, that is a very legitimate fear. But with the SMART scale, I was able to see different ratios between, like, and it's not 100% accurate, but it's close, right? And so I'm able to see, okay, what's increasing here? And I think another thing too to mention is, for me, putting muscle on my body isn't just an aesthetic goal. For me, it's longevity. Like, we want to be putting that extra strain from the muscle on our bones so that we have strong bones as we age. Like, I think long term, like, this is really about longevity. Muscle is also really important for our brain health, which is so important as we age as well. So it's not just aesthetics. And I think for the woman who is listening right now that wants to embark on this, but is really scared to see that scale increase, you really need to get clear on what your why is. Like, why do you want to do this? Is it because you want to be able to keep up with your kids 10, 20, 30 years from now? Is it because you want to reduce your risk of cognitive decline? Like, what is your reasoning? And then that can help be your guiding light as you start this journey, and really have to lean into trusting the process. So as I saw the scale creep up, I had to just continue to trust the process. And all of a sudden, a month later, I was able to pick up heavier dumbbells. And I was like, oh, this is working. Like, you will see that, but you have to be patient and you have to be consistent. And we live in a world where we just want that instant gratification. This process, it doesn't happen that way. But if you can trust it, you will get to where you want to be.
I think too that there's been such a message around like women are frail and that they can't lift heavy. And often I hear people say like, I don't even know where to begin or how to start. And so there's this uncomfortableness of like starting something new and like lifting weights. And so that's like working with a trainer. Somebody can work one-on-one with you to guide you, to give you that foundation. Same thing like with working with a health coach or nutrition practitioner, someone to help you, give you those foundational tools so that then you can move into the gym by yourself and begin to understand how to work different parts of your body, how to lift the weights appropriately so not to cause injury. Because we don't want you going out and injuring yourself, because that's going to set you back as well. So getting some foundational tools and ways to support your body so that you can have that. And I want to say too, one, sarcopenia, which is a loss of muscle, happens pretty rapidly for women as we start to move through perimenopause and menopause. So the more that you can focus on strength and building that muscle now, the better foundation you're going to have moving into those peri and postmenopausal years, which are so important. What you do now is going to affect you 40 years from now. And I know for myself, like, I want to continue to have that independence. And no shade to like the boomers, but they didn't have the same exposure to strength training that we have now. And so we can often see that generation be a little bit more frail. And then if you have, but women, if you break your hip when you're older, that's going to be the thing that could take you out, because we lose that independence. And there's so many other things that occur with that. So I'm always like, I am building this body so that I can be really strong, independent, that I can throw my suitcase above when I travel, because I'm going to be traveling a lot when I'm like 80 years old. I want to be hiking those mountains. I still want to be able to experience life with like the strength and independence that I have now.
Exactly. No, same.
Yeah. Well, Edie, I really enjoyed our conversation. This was so insightful, and I'm sure many people want to know how they can connect with you. Where can they find you?
Yep, absolutely. Well, Brandy, this was such a joy, and I'm sure we could continue talking a lot longer. So I have my website, Wellness with Edie, and then I also am Wellness with Edie on Instagram. And then I recently started a Substack where I really just take down or try to take down just myths and hypes around nutrition and really help you just clear out the noise and figure out what you need for your life and for your body. And that's called Daily Deposits. But I have a link to that on my website as well.
Amazing. Everybody go check her out. Let's check out her Substack and become subscribers to that. And then Edie also has for you a Nourish Without Guilt, Feed the Woman You're Becoming on her website. So if you go to her website, Wellness with Edie, that will pop up for you where you can download that guide for free. It's going to help women understand what their bodies actually need when it comes to your macronutrients and how to eat without feeling like you're super restrictive, but dialing into those hunger cues.
Exactly.
All right. Well, this was wonderful. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Healthy Buzz. I hope this conversation has left you feeling seen, supported, and ready to take the next step in your health journey. Love what you heard? Make sure you subscribe to Healthy Buzz so you never miss an honest conversation. And if you found this valuable, please take a moment to leave a review. I truly appreciate it. For exclusive weekly tips and holistic strategies, be sure to subscribe to my weekly newsletter. The link is in the show notes. Remember, this isn't just nutrition, it's permission to trust your body. I'll catch you on the next episode of Healthy Buzz.